What kind of impact would your church make in your community if every one of your members were passionately following the calling of God in their lives? What kind of impact would your church make if every one of your members were living out their life for Christ without fear?
What would happen to this world and just even to the communities where those churches exist if 100% of the people knew exactly what God wanted them to do and had no fear to just go out there and do it? What would that do to our communities?
Cheryl Harris, motivator, encourager, and author, will take you and your congregation beyond the frame of who you think you are, the roles you play, and the labels you wear, and help you discover God's big picture for your life and begin living beyond the frame.
People ask me where in the world living beyond the frame came from, and it really comes from museums. They will have a frame around the original masterpiece, but if you lift off that frame, there's actually canvas that is painted it's actually wrapped around a piece of wood, and if you took off the frame, you'd see that the paint goes all the way to the edges of the canvas, but it's usually sections that we never see, nobody ever sees. In life, how often we just don't see the whole thing, and really the only one who does is the creator, the masterpiece worker.
Through humor, illustration, and interactive exercises, Cheryl will help you lead your congregation to discover what God has uniquely created them to do.
Show of hands. How many people in this room believe that God has given them a mission, a vision, something that you were created to do? How many? Show of hands.
The big fat question is, if every one of the members of your church knew that they could not possibly fail, or could not disqualify themselves from whatever vision or mission God has called them to do, what would that look like in your churches, and what would that look like in your community?
If you knew that you could not fail or disqualify yourself from what God has called you, what would you be doing right now? And maybe you're doing it right now. Okay, this is where you raise your hands.
Living Beyond the Frame uses the story of Moses to reveal how God overcomes what we think disqualifies us from God's big picture for our lives.
Moses is cool because Moses is he's not this great guy who's ready to respond to the call of God right away. He's ready to put up argument after argument because he's afraid.
You know what I like about Moses most is that he's just a regular guy. He's got all the labels, and he knows it. He is arguing with the bush, okay? He doesn't really get it that it's God. I mean, there's a voice coming out of it, but I mean, what would you do if a bush started talking to you?
From Moses' perspective, he's telling God, are you crazy? And boy, I can relate to that guy because I'm like, are you crazy? And I think that's what's so fun about Moses is that I like Moses. He is going to argue with God about God's sanity in calling him. And boy, I can so see myself doing that. And there are people out in the congregation who are saying, who maybe think, God is saying this to me. Is he crazy? Am I worshiping a crazy God? And yeah, God's crazy. And yet he's crazy because he loves us. And he knows it's about his power. And eventually, God's provision overcomes all of Moses' insecurities. And that gives me hope.
If you desire to see your congregation discover God's true plans beyond their vision and his true peace beyond their fears, consider inviting Cheryl Harris to your church.
There's all kinds of ways you can use this material, and you can begin to speak the same language, which is really the language of God dealing with Moses. It's the same language. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And you know, we all have our stuff, and it's really getting it out on the table and talking about it and letting God deal and moving us on beyond whatever's holding us back.
To learn more about Cheryl Harris and Living Beyond the Frame, visit livingbeyondtheframe.org or call 206-793-4487.